Good morning, everybody. I'm Myra Ansari here for Wave Now. I hope you're having a good day so far. We are going live to an event that's happening at the Ollie Center this morning, talking about the impacts of gun violence and how to reduce gun violence. We know that it is a major issue that impacts so many people across our community. So several local leaders, including the mayor of Louisville, Craig Greenberg, are at the Ollie Center giving remarks at this conference that's going on. It's the Louisville Alliance for Sustainable Gun Violence Reduction. Let's listen in.
So I wanted to take the time to do that. The second piece I want to acknowledge is you have a lot of people that are in the room that are doing this work. We oftentimes focus on those who are impacted in terms of the victims, but this is a load that those who are in the work every single day are taking on. And the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods just had a loss, Jamie Jackson. And you have members of this community that are here today because they're committed to this work, despite carrying, that heavy realization. So I just wanted to acknowledge not only those members of that group, but also anybody that, feels overwhelmed, burdened by having to show up every day on this topic. And then I had Kevin Wigington, and then there was a gentleman that just moved to Louisville, also came and spoke about, frameworks of translating, what you're going to see today to organize and empower and to optimize the existing structures that are in place. Okay, so let's get back into it. We have Mayor Greenberg, who is here, and is going to come up and have a couple of statements and make a couple of comments to take us into the next part, which is going to be the social network analysis presentation. Mayor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. The conversations that you all are having today, the action that you all are taking every day and talking about taking together in the future is so important. We're here because we have a crisis of gun violence in our city. I've seen it firsthand. I know many of you in this room have seen it firsthand. Many of you have lost loved ones to gun violence. You've held hands with and cried with parents who've lost children, kids who've lost parents, brothers, sisters, friends. All of us are here, whether we've lost someone in our family or not. We're here because we've had enough, more than enough of these tragedies. And we know we have to do more to prevent these tragedies from continuing to happen as we continue to see them happen. We have to find new ways to prevent this epidemic of gun violence from claiming more lives in the city that we love. The good news is that there are so many good people and good organizations like you all here today that are already dedicated to this cause. That's why this gathering is so important. We need to get to know each other better, understand where we can help each other, where we can join forces and make an even greater impact. This challenge is too big and too widespread for any one of us to take on by ourselves or just with our own organization. But together, we can create far more progress and save far many more lives. That's because each of us here today and across the city can play an important role. Individuals, nonprofits, faith groups, higher education, city government, all of us. We each have a small piece of the puzzle that, when we put it all together, lets us create a safer, a stronger, and a healthier city. I want to give a special shout out to Paul Callahan and all of his colleagues at the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods. For putting this event together with the Louisville Alliance for Sustainable Gun Violence Reduction, for other partners like Interfaith Path to Peace, and Clout, and so many other organizations for putting this event together, but also for the important work that you all do every day. Thank you very much. At Metro Government, we know we need to do even more than we're already doing to reduce gun violence. One key to that is to continue to implement reforms and improvement at LMPD to improve transparency, collaboration, and accountability with our police, throughout Metro Government, and with all of your organizations. We're working within state law to disassemble and label firearms with warning labels that have been involved in crimes. We also have to deploy the right resources to the right situations. And that's why we just recently announced that we're expanding our deflection program to cover the entire city by partnering with social workers at 7 counties so that some crisis calls to 911 that don't need a police response get a social worker response. This in turn frees up police officers to work on what we need them to do, which is to prevent violent crime from happening in the first place. We also need to find more resources for programs like group violence intervention, and for education, training, and employment programs like Evolve 502, Code Louisville, and an expanded summer work so that our young people have every opportunity to pursue their hopes and dreams. We're going to continue to expand hours of programming in our city's community centers, in our libraries, in our parks. We're developing both short and long-term solutions and look forward to working with all of you. Our goal is to help people who might be on the path to tragedy find reasons to change direction. That's some of what we're doing. There are many more announcements in the work. But part of the point of this summit and all of our communication is that we want you to let us know what else needs to happen. What are other ways that we can work together to save even more lives? So please, today, as you're having these conversations, the group agreements that were just read were wonderful. Be bold with your ideas, be honest with your thoughts, and let us know. Let each other know what you think is needed and what you think is possible. So whether it's working with Metro Government, whether it's working with LMPD, or whether it's just working with one another, we can all make a difference. Nothing is too small to make a difference. Nothing is too big to be considered. Thank you all again for what you're doing today and every day. Let's keep working together in partnership to create a city full of safer, stronger, and healthier neighborhoods. Let's create a city where we don't mourn any more child or adults lost to gun violence. Thank you all very much.
Okay, so now we will move into the 80,000 foot in the air perspective that we talked about. Remember the hourglass, right? This is going to be the visualization of everybody that submitted information and participated in contributing to their role in the ecosystem. And we're going to have Judd Hendricks come up and facilitate this process.
Thank you, Mayor Greenberg. We're here to say you're not alone. The community is going to be solving this problem, right? And we know government has a role, LMPD has a role, but we're here to say we are the change. This is our community, and we want to partner with you. Thank you for being here and being a partner in this work. And I also do want to say. Again, Tron is what Errol, you didn't get that, Tron. But one of the things that it's important to model, and I want to thank Paul and the whole Ocean staff really made this happen. And so the partnership with them has been invaluable. And that is the way forward. The way forward is these kinds of partnerships. And it wasn't easy, as you can imagine, right? We had our moments where we were struggling with each other, but we held in there, and we've created trust in putting this on together. And it hasn't been easy. This work is not easy, as you all know, it's not easy. But building these partnerships is really important. So I just want to thank Ocean specifically for your partnership. So I'm going to do a little geek out for just a little bit. So got some stuff on screens that I want to try to explain the social network analysis that we did. But before I do that, I want to give a little bit of context for this work. So we've already stated, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but we've already named that gun violence and homicides does not affect all of us similarly. One of the things we're looking at is community violence. Within community violence, which includes a lot of different forms of violence, gun violence is one aspect of that. We really are focusing on gun violence and homicides because of the degree of pain and trauma it creates. So that's really a focus, but we're also talking about other forms of violence. But if we will address, we think, the root causes of gun violence, a lot of these other issues of violence will also be better. So this really is what we're focusing on. Gun violence and homicides really is kind of a focus of this work at this point. So many of you know that gun violence over the last 3 years has been rising. And we know also that we've been talking about that this disproportionately affects young Black men. The stat that of the 60 young people who died of homicides in 2022, 55 were Black and 48 were young Black men. So we know this disproportionately affects certain populations. And it's important as we're beginning to talk about this that we understand not only community violence, but what we call structural violence. So one of the things that we want to help you connect is structural violence to interpersonal violence. This map here, just take a look at the map. The map itself is disturbing. The red is homicides, the blue are gunshots or shootings. And if you just take a look at that map, we can see that this issue affects all of us, but affects some of us more deeply. And so here's the questions we're asking about the systemic nature of that. What is the relationship of poverty and violence? Well, this is a food insecurity map, which is a great measure of poverty. That map is the same map that you just saw, right? The red are those who experience higher degrees of food insecurity. In fact, individuals in a household at or below the poverty line have more than double the rate of victimization related to those in high-income areas. Poverty is a structural issue related to interpersonal violence. And I think this needs to be in our narrative, what we're talking about. And we need to name that as a dynamic within the issue of poverty. Please.
Do you see how basically what you're suggesting is that Black men and Black youth isn't necessarily a leading cause, right? They're a lagging indicator. So we should look at them like a lagging indicator. I'm glad that young Black men exist so that they can tell us and inform us as to what type of inequities that we have in our society that is causing this very issue. So look at it like that. Do not look at it like, oh, well, let's just solve the Black male issue. No, Black men are informing you as to what the total issues of the structure is happening. And so we need to solve those issues. Because I can't think of how many young Black males own gun companies. I'm sorry. I don't know how many young Black males own gun companies or produce bullets or anything like that, or have a supply chain associated with making sure that these guns make it from wherever the manufacturer is making it to their hands.
Yeah.
It's been placed in their hands. And so we need to find out the issue and solve that, right?
Yes.
Thanks.
And I would love if you want to host that conversation tomorrow. That's a great conversation that you can host tomorrow in our open space. Thank you. So then we know that poverty is one of the dynamics, but then we ask the question about what causes poverty, right? And so many of you know about this map, right? It's the redlining map, which redlining was a policy. This map was, the colored items are in 1939, a group of investors rated neighborhoods on how well their investments would do in this area. And we know they were white men. And they rated them on good, B, and A, B, C, and D. And then what happened from that map is people stopped investing in the communities that they represented. So we know there was a racial policy based upon discrimination that got enacted in a structure that had to do with economic development. And this is a disturbing map. The black dots are places, let me see if I can go in a little closer. The black dots are homicides from 2012 to 2018. They're the same map. A racist drawn policy got enacted in a system called institutional racism, which is another form of violence. That's structural violence. Structural violence happened in these communities, and now the homicide map overlaid on them is the same map. There is a connection. This is the connection that we need to be making. Redline neighborhoods have over 5 times the number of gunshot victims than those in the other rated neighborhoods. Right, that was 1939. And those policies continued to create under-resourced communities. And then we see that the result of that is poverty, internalized racism, and then the conditions by which interpersonal violence happens. This is really important that we make these connections, that we have these conversations. Upstream of homicides is whiteness. It is unreflected whiteness that gets put into policies, into structures by those who have power, that have impact on communities, that create the conditions by which interpersonal violence is more likely to happen. We have to continue these conversations today and tomorrow. And so we're not just talking about interpersonal violence, we're going all the way upstream. Right? We're going upstream on these causes, and we're going to begin talking about what we need to do upstream in order that we do not have so many homicides at midstream, right? And so tomorrow we're going to be asking some questions about our own personal responsibility in structural violence and in interpersonal violence. A time for us to each reflect on that. But those are conversations we need to continue to have. If you have other ways you want to reflect on that or talk about that, please write that down on your yellow paper, take that back, and host a conversation on it tomorrow. These are the kind of conversations that we want to be having.
Judd, on that note, we do have a comment.
Please.
And I want to first, from a housekeeping standpoint, let everybody know, because I see everybody taking pictures. This presentation is going to go out to all participants, so you'll have that information on hand. We have Antonio Brown that would like to say something.
Not to be trying to come off disrespectful, I think we all know this information that does this work. I think this is a waste of precious time. I know what Howard would do, because we got to do this work, like he just said, 3 homicides last night. 28th Street was the last one. I was right down the street and didn't know it was an hour before I left that house, somebody got killed. So what we gotta understand is we already know that it's legislation over conversation. So I think we really need to get to the solutions. Because we know the problems. We live the problems. I'm Black. I understand it. I've been profiled my entire life. So I just think we really need to wrap this up and actually get this work done. I see faces out there that's actually doing the work. We know this. So we need to really get this work done. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. And Judge, one more comment.
Please.
I just want to paraphrase what Antonio said. You know, performative and ceremonial above action based. So we hear you, and what Judge is doing is laying the context. There's some people in this room that don't know the context. Because you show up when the body is on the ground and you're there, you know this. So we appreciate your patience as we make our way through this context, bro. All right.
I'm Mark Pence. It's good to see everybody. I love y'all. This is wonderful. But just to piggyback on what Antonio said, because I know a lot of times when people just, say what they feel, and it kind of comes off as if it's anger. So I just want to I want to redirect that to just let y'all know this man's just speaking from his personal truth. A lot of us in here, that might have been my family member, some who passed away, or one of those three people, somebody who we love, care for, or whatever. So we know the information. A lot of the people in here have watched me growing up, so I know y'all born and raised Louisvillians like I am. Nothing's new. We've been watching the same things over and over again. The places where the most crime happened, there just so happens to be a lot of police patrol offices, stations, this and that and the other. So while it is important for everybody to know the information, some of us already have it. So what's really important is about us being intentional in our work, holding people accountable, making sure that if you're doing this work, that you're really doing this work and that the receipts and the paperwork match. That's the first thing. I'm not here to disrespect nobody and nothing like that. We just gotta be honest. Because a lot of our young people are dying, and I'm one of those young people that could have died. I can't tell you how many times I've been shot at and had a gun pointed at me. I'm fortunate. A lot of us in here are fortunate. We got lucky. But what about all these kids out here in Park Hill, Beach Terrace, wherever they're from, that won't get lucky? That's what he was kind of pointing at. We got to hold these grocery accountable. At no point in time in this community have we as a people ever held Kroger's accountable for closing these grocery stores with no explanation. They can say it's loss prevention, but where are the receipts? These people need food. It's really hard when you live in the West End. You gotta go all the way to Jeffersonville, New Albany, just to get some food. You gotta pay $4.50 to cash a check. We'll never get out of poverty when you gotta spend so much money to cash a check. You gotta spend gas money to go out of your neighborhood, to take money out of our neighborhoods will never even be able to flourish because we can't even keep the money in the neighborhoods. There's no reason Earthquakes High School doesn't have the same things Manual High School has. Let's be honest. Everybody in this room, your fate was decided for you based off the high school you went to. I know mine was because I'm a proud graduate of Liberty High School. I went through a metal detector every day, and look at me right now. Some of y'all knew me from back in the day, so look at me right now. I was the one who wasn't supposed to make it, and I'm right here. But I'm one person. We got a whole community of black men. Miss Rose could tell you, because her black men that inspire me is no longer with us. And she's a good woman. Church, her son went to church. We say put him back in church, but her son went to church every Sunday, and he's not here with us. So it's bigger than that. We gotta hold these corporations and entities accountable too. Like I said, I ain't here to hurt nobody's feelings, don't upset nobody. We just gotta tell the truth. Because like he said, we need solutions. This is the city of Ali, but we're not gonna keep calling this the city of Ali and moving not even near an ounce is great, because he didn't stand for any of this. That man refused to go to Vietnam because he didn't want to kill nobody. How many black people that died on Muhammad Ali Boulevard? That don't add up. The city where the greatest champion came from, and we gotta be in here at the Ali Center having a meeting about how we stop gun violence. But we the city that had the greatest fighter that ever lived. It's not adding up. I ain't gonna go on and on. All I'm gonna say is, this brother man, what he said, we're not trying to change the mood in here. I love all y'all. I want to celebrate and have a good time. Because this is a great city. We do got some great things going on. Everybody in here is great. Because just about everybody in here helped me be great. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this room full of people. So I know the potential's here, but we got to stay focused. We got to remember to be accountable, and we got to remember to unify and come together. A lot of us in here, I've worked with y'all individually, but I've never worked with y'all all as one unit. That's what it's about. I can care less about who get credit or this and that. It's just about to say to these kids to get this work done. So I'm not gonna take all this up. I love all y'all. I appreciate it. Shout out to Greenberg, but let's be serious in what we doing, because I've been to a lot of meetings like this, but gun violence is increasing.
Yes.
So let's just be realistic. I appreciate you, bro.
Okay, so thank you, Judge. for
Yeah, no,
holding
this-
space for them. I want to
Exactly what needs to be
anybody
said.
that has something, and Antonio as well, Mark, for your all word. People that are doing, like, that are on the ground, that's what you just heard from. That wasn't
Yeah.
planned. They said something to say, we hear you, we see you, okay? And I want to encourage anybody that has something to say at this time to put your comments in open space. We need to move through this presentation. So I'm going to send it back to Judd, and we will continue to hold space like that for those who are in the audience, okay?
And thank you, Mark. And Mark's, I think, going to be hosting a social innovator conversation tomorrow afternoon. So go and hear more about what Mark's doing. So thank you, Mark. So I do want to move through this, and I realize, right, this has got to feel really big and impersonal. So I appreciate your grace and letting me try to get through this, because I do think it will inform our work together. So I'll try to move quickly. I'm going to move through this. One of the things we talk about is an ecosystem. That's kind of a fancy word basically for just talking about the different contexts in which we live and move and have our being. And so we do know that different ones of you are working at different levels. Some of you are working with individuals. Some of you are working in interpersonal relationship dynamics. Some of you are working at a community level, and some of you are working at a society level. That is what it takes as the ecosystem for us to all be working in different places. And we want you to see people that are working in those different places, yet still working to reduce gun violence. One of the issues that we want to talk about is the building trust between macro level organizations and micro grassroots organizations. One of the things we know from our social innovation from our analysis is that there is a disconnect between macro level organizations, which are not large nonprofits, often, government, large organizations, and those that are doing the work. So some of the work that we need to be doing to be a healthy ecosystem is to build bridges of communication and trust between macro level organizations and grassroots organizations. That's one of the things that we're committed to doing. Some of the language we're going to be using is upstream, midstream, and downstream on our graph back there. We do want you to kind of be aware of that language. Working upstream, that's before a homicide happens or before an act of violence happens. A lot of people working upstream. Then there's midstream. Those are people that are really trying to stop the bleed. A lot of you here are in that space. You're trying to interrupt, you're trying to build peace between volatile situations. Our interrupters are doing that work. That's midstream work. And then there's downstream work. A lot of us working to care for those who have been affected by gun violence. And to care for reentry work is downstream. And trying to care and provide resources for people who are in the justice system. So again, sometimes we get into who's doing the right work, who's better, and that's not going to serve us as an ecosystem. What will serve us is if we can all see each other and affirm that we have different roles in helping stop violence. And we're all important. We all have different roles. And it's really important for us to affirm one another in those different roles. These are different areas of work in violence prevention. Again, I'm getting a little bit technical, but this will kind of serve us some tomorrow. There are different roles that people have. And again, it's really important for us to affirm our different roles, to see them. There are a lot of different spaces that we'll be in tomorrow. People will be in work groups. So when you're talking about how do we move strategy forward, that is a lot of what's going to be happening tomorrow. In these groups will be working together to create strategy and how to move forward. So I want to really quickly jump into the ecosystem analysis. And I know this looks overwhelming. I'm not going to go through all of these. What we did, ecosystem analysis is a way of looking and seeing the whole system. So this diagram is us. This is what the social network analysis created. These are our interconnections. These are the people that are working in this space. So really quickly, I want to say, we did a analysis. We have found 309 organizations that are some way connected to violence prevention work. And we sent out a survey to 309, and we did a snowball method. So we just keep hearing who's doing the work, and we built it up. And now you'll have a chance, if you haven't filled it out, to do that here. And then we will do another analysis of it and give you that full report later. So there were 13 questions, 6 relational questions. I'll talk about those some. We had a 45% response rate, which is about twice the average of an industry survey. And a lot of that is Erica here with Ocean? Erica, are you around? Erica was so great. She's downstairs working, I think, but so great helping us get people to fill out the survey. So thank you, Erica. We had a great response rate. So these are some of the things that we analyzed in relationships. So when an organization got the survey, they filled out, answered these 12 questions, and we'll show you the results of those. And then they were able to choose other organizations which they had established relationships with. So on the survey, they could do that. And then they were asked questions about their relationship with those organizations. And these were some of the questions that ended up being, and I'll show you some of the results of these. But we analyzed value in relationships. We analyzed power, influence. Trust is a big one. So they were able to look at and analyze other relationships that they had. And that's what created the graph that you see. So what I want to go into now really quickly is just to tell you about some of our network scores. First of all, density is a measure of how connected we are with each other. And one of the things we found out is our ecosystem is not connected. 2% connected, which is really low for a system. So a lot of our work is doing what we're doing right now. We just need to connect to each other. In order to have a healthy system, we ought to be up around 20%. That means 20% of you all know 20% of you, right? So that you're in relationship with 20%. There's some other things on there in the full report. You'll hear about those. One of the positives is we do see like we're reliable. The ecosystem thinks we're reliable. When we say we're going to do something, we have some sense that we will do it. Also, we're very open to discussion. You may or may not think that, but the ecosystem actually tested fairly high on being open to being in conversation with each other. So that's a plus.
What was the question that?
Yeah, the trust was, there were a couple of different questions that had to do with trust. Is this other group open to conversation? Are they reliable? Some of these scores create some of the other scores. So discussion and reliability helped create a trust score. I was actually surprised that we were fairly moderate with trust. What I'm interested in is looking at, is it because some of the sub-networks of the ecosystem trust each other, but the whole system doesn't necessarily trust each other. But that will come out in our full report. Our goal is to increase this by 20% in 3 years. So this is the work of cultivating the ecosystem. Organizational scores, each organization that took it gets a score, and we will be sending out to each of your organizations what your individual organization score was in order to help you be a better ecosystem partner. So you will get a score on your trust. If you filled it out and other organizations that analyzed you, they will be telling you how much they trust you. And we will be working with organizations to help them be better partners. So each organization that took it will get your own individual score. So one of the things we want to look at is who was in this sector, who was working on ecosystemic issues. This is based upon sector. And one of the interesting things, faith communities tested they are present in working on gun violence. One of the highest that we found was faith communities. Those of you that are part of faith communities, yeah, thank you. Y'all are showing up. Louisville is a community that has a lot of presence, and you are a powerful dynamic in changing what happens. Thank you for being here. We see you. You're important. And then you can look and see the other ones. One of the questions is who's missing from violence prevention work? One of the ones that I found is a lack of businesses. There are very few businesses that anybody identified as saying, hey, they're really involved in violence prevention work. So we as an ecosystem, again, this is we. I'm telling you what you said, okay? This is what you said. And I think what we need to do is figure out how we get business involved in this conversation. So I'm asking you these questions. What do we need to do if there are certain groups that aren't present here? Right? That's a us question. If you look at race, this was really powerful. Over 46% of the organizations in this space are Black-led organizations. That the majority of their population, yes, you all are the ones doing the work. And that's what it says. You all are invested. And so you're disproportionately, I think, Black African Americans, 23% of the Louisville population. You all are doubling, you're overrepresented in this work. Thank you. We see you. You're doing the work. Thank you. Yeah, that's not news to a lot of you, I know. So one of the questions we asked are what are the primary areas of violence prevention work that you work in? And so we'll get into this a little bit more. We did find that a lot of people were in the violence interruption space, community mobilization, and prevention with general populations. We'll talk about those later. Level of change. This goes back to the ecosystem. This is what area or what space you're working in. And this was really, I thought this was good that we're really balanced. We have a lot of people working with individuals, a lot of people working in inter-relationship space, a lot of people in community, and also in systems change. This is a pretty balanced ecosystem. So I think we can feel good. That's a strength that we have. We asked what were the primary, if we were to create an alliance, which we have, if we were to create an alliance, what would be our primary goals? And so this was the number one answer is exactly what we've been talking about. A reduction in racism and poverty. The ecosystem is thinking upstream. That's what that means. The ecosystem knows. We even chose that before we said reduction in gun violence. I thought that was really interesting. The ecosystem knows upstream issues are really important. We asked what aspect of collaboration will contribute to success of this emerging ecosystem. And 20%, the highest number, said, let's get together. We're not getting together. So thank you for being, that's what we're doing. We're getting together. We're listening to each other. We're making the connections. How can this emerging violence prevention network be most helpful to your organization? I hope somebody will host a conversation on this tomorrow. People want the ecosystem to create a citywide campaign to bring awareness to violence prevention and solutions. So I hope somebody hosts a conversation on what would it like if we all came together and created a citywide campaign to inform all those that are not here. I think that's what you're saying. So let's talk about that. This is our work. We know that trust is a huge issue. Trust is a definer of whether or not we will collaborate with each other. So one, we won't collaborate if we don't know each other. Two, we will not collaborate if we don't trust each other. So building our trust score is a major issue, something that we need to focus on. So we said, what is your, from your often how do we create different funding sources? You also mentioned historical and systemic. So, last part, what are the most effective means and interorganizational trust? 23% of you said cultivation of personal connections. That's what we're doing right now. Thank you for being a part of that. So, I want to give us some time to reflect in your tables about what you've just heard. So we're going to take about for you to ask some of these questions. What did you hear that feels important about surprised you about what you heard? And what does this information invite you to do? So based upon what you heard, we're going to give you about 10, 12 minutes as a take. So again, introduce yourself if new people have come to your table. And let's start with the youngest person and go to the left. Let's come back to that. Let's do the table conversation. So we'll give you 10 to 12 minutes. Check.
Yeah, but come with me.
That'd be okay. sure she is. I told her she's strong. She can handle this.